Congressman Mike Gallagher, also House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, who you saw at the beginning there. He led the GOP press conference today on the origins of the pandemic. Thank you, gentlemen. Great to have both of you with us. I want to start with this, actually, to you, Mike Gallagher. This is a soundbite from the then Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, who was asked about this. And I want to just remind everybody that these games happened in the early fall of 2019, September, October 2019. So this is a crucial moment in the history of this. Watch this.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Was there a special screening for the military team that went to Wuhan, the athletic team?
I'm not aware of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not.
In November, they had a team in Wuhan? Sorry.
So you see how that went. Congressman Gallagher, do we think that any of our athletes who attended have tested for COVID antibodies? Do we know if any of them got sick then?
We don't. That's why we need answers from the Pentagon. What we do know is that athletes from countries like France, Italy, Germany have reported having COVID-like symptoms. So all I am asking Secretary Austin and Chairman Milley to do is review the 284 Americans who went to those games and ask simple questions. Were they sick? Do we have antibody tests? Though it's, too late to do some testing, we can get their medical records. We need to get a better understanding of the origin of this pandemic to understand all of the things that the Chinese Communist Party did to cover up the disease, thereby costing us precious time and potentially millions of lives.
Are you suggesting, Congressman Gallagher, that the Pentagon knows something about this that they're not sharing?
I'm just suggesting that it would be a good idea to talk to all of the athletes who went to the Wuhan Games and get an assessment as to whether they think they were exposed, right? We now know, thanks to declassified information from the outgoing Trump administration, that lab workers at the Wuhan Institute were infected as early as November. Some points have put that even earlier. So imagine if the Chinese Communist Party knew that they had an outbreak, but still allowed the games to happen. What we would have is our first super spreader event where 9,000 athletes go back to their home countries, expediting the spread of the pandemic.
What about you, Congressman Scalise? Do you think that the Pentagon knows more about this than they're letting on? Is there any reason to think that?
Well, what we're finding out every day is that there's a mountain of evidence growing that there were people, scientists here in America, that knew the high likelihood that the virus started in the Wuhan lab, and yet they weren't sharing it with others. And in fact, those of us who a year ago and longer ago were suggesting, not claiming, but suggesting it might have started in the lab, were being called conspiracy theorists. Those kind of posts were blocked on social media. And now today, most of the medical community, in not only the United States, but around the world, recognizes it might have very well started in the lab, but yet not a single hearing by Speaker Pelosi in the House on this. It's like they're trying to cover up for China instead of getting basic answers that we all ought to want to find the truth about.
Yeah, I understood. But just to go back to my question for just quickly, do you think the Pentagon has been forthcoming about what they know about whether or not any of the athletes in the military, more than 200 in the fall of 2019, got COVID?
Well, we don't know that, Martha, and just like Congressman Gallagher said, I mean, we should be trying to get the answers to this. We are trying to get those answers. And if they don't allow hearings, it's hard to get those answers because those officials don't come in. That's why we're going to be having our own hearing next week. And we've called a lot of witnesses to come forward, good, respected scientific and medical experts that hopefully can shed more light on this. But frankly, it's Speaker Pelosi, they have the subpoena powers. They should be bringing everybody in who had communication with those scientists at the Wuhan lab, because China's surely not being forthright. The Communist Party there is hiding evidence, maybe has destroyed evidence. Let's find out as much as we can now while we can still get some of those answers.
But, this is what I heard Dr. Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins bring up earlier today in another interview earlier on Fox. And he said, it's great that Congress is looking into this, but they're not likely to find anything. So much has been destroyed. The Chinese government has a vested interest in making sure that none of this ever gets out, and that there are not any samples from those early COVID, genetic DNA samples that you're not going to find them. Is this effort going to have anything fruitful?
I don't necessarily agree with that assessment, because we're learning more today, just in the last few weeks. I mean, look at the email trove that came out a few weeks ago. There are more reports now that gain-of-function research, whether it was directly or indirectly funded, had a role to play in this, the way that they were genetically modifying the mice over there in that Wuhan lab. All of these are things we can find out a lot more, and people in America know some of those answers. Let's at least get those answers on the table.
Yeah, and I think the coordinated pressure on China to tell us what they know is, even if we don't get it, we have to do that, and certainly in conjunction with many other countries in the world. Thank you very much, Congressman Scalise. Good to see you today. Congressman Gallagher, thank you very much, sir. Good to see you both.
Good being with you, Martha.
Thank you.